In pretty much all post-apocalyptic movies, characters just hop in a car, hotwire it, and drive away. But in a real post-collapse world, if you try to do that, it's not going to work. Why? Because the tires are rotten, the batteries are dead, the timing belt is torn apart, the hydraulics don't work, the car is leaking since the seals are cooked, and the engine is filled with water and corroded. And that's not all the problems. Of course, it takes a while for cars to reach this terrible condition, but how long will it take? First of all, we should know what type of car we're talking about. Gasoline-powered cars, diesel car, hybrid cars, or nerdy cars. Diesel cars last longer, especially if it's a heavy-duty car like a truck. Since they're made with industrial durability standards, trust me, they're in a completely different leagues in terms of durability and longevity. Unlike most modern cars, which are deliberately designed to break down after a certain time so that you're forced to buy a new one. Military vehicles like Humvees and MRAPs are tough too. First, let's talk about fuel. There's a myth among people that gasoline will go bad after 1 to 3 months. Actually, gasoline will start to degrade after 3 to 6 months, depending on the condition of storage and its type. If it has ethanol in it, it might absorb moisture from the air and form water, but this can be fixed if you remove the water. If it doesn't have ethanol, it can still degrade by losing octane and efficiency. Fuel stabilizers can extend this time to 2 to 3 years or more. Even if you don't use fuel stabilizers, it might still work on some engines, but you need to filter the gas with the piece of cloth to remove varnishes, deposits, and gums. It won't be 100% efficient and might be harsh on the engine, but it will get the job done, unless your car is fuel sensitive, which is the case for most modern cars, especially ones with turbochargers. Older models with the carburetors instead of fuel injectors are usually more compatible with degraded fuels, especially if you tweak the ignition timing to optimize for the fuel. You'd be better off with a flex fuel engine. These are less fuel sensitive because they have sensors that adjust the engine's ignition timing based on the fuel type, but even they might have problems with old fuels. Engines used to be able to run on everything, from old gasoline to aviation fuel or even booze. But now, if the octane is too low or high, they might have problems. Pathetic. So pathetic. Diesel fuel, on the other hand, has a stronger shelf life. If it's stored in a sealed container and kept in a cool environment with stabilizers and regularly inspected for microbial growth, it might be usable for 15 years or more. Again, this is assuming it's in a cold environment like a nuclear winter or somewhere below 20 degrees Celsius. If it's not in ideal conditions but is still sealed, it will last around 5 years. Also, you can make biodiesel, which might take a lot of resources, but it's still a possibility. If your car uses ethanol as fuel, you have the perk of being able to produce your own fuel more easily compared to the biodiesel. However, ethanol will become unusable after about 1 to 2 years, and you might have trouble finding it. Producing it in high amounts also requires considerable amount of resources. Kerosene-powered engines use a fuel that can last up to 10 years, but the problem is that kerosene is hard to find. If your car runs on propane or CNG, you'll be fine since these fuels don't have an expiration date as long as the tank isn't damaged. There are other types of engines that run on water or even human feces. Yeah, they don't have problems with fuel degradation or shortage, but I don't think any of you have that type of car. Recent studies shows that electric car batteries will last longer than the car itself. However, charging them requires a very high amount of electricity. You know, high amps, high watts, high volts, blah blah, which is hard to produce with solar panels unless you have a pretty much a little solar power planet. And I don't think Elon Musk was truthful when he claimed Tesla charging a station would remain operational even during a zombie apocalypse.
Charging stations generate the energy during the day and then also have a localized battery pack so that people can charge at night. The Tesla supercharging stations would continue to function even in a zombie apocalypse. So, just never know. That's coming one day. We know it. It's just a matter of time.
Gasifier engines are another option if you know some basic engineering. They run on wood and coal. These were used during World War II when there was a fuel shortage. Yes, they produce toxic gas, but if you're not a careless idiot, you won't neutralize yourself. They also produce tar, so the engine needs deep cleaning after a while. But hey, don't all engines need a maintenance? The last option is a steam engine, which can use anything that burns, like 20 years old gasoline or even woods. It can also be used to purifying water. We won't go any deeper into fuel longevity, since I guess that needs another video dedicated to itself. As you can see, fuel shouldn't be your main concern, especially for diesel car owners, since there are lots of options. The main issue will be parts that degrade. I'll tell you about them and give you some alternatives. But before we get into that, please smash that subscribe button. All the shelf lives I will mention for the rest of the video is the maximum shelf life in the ideal condition. Of course, they might last longer or shorter than that based on brand quality and materials, but I'm giving you a general idea of their longevity. So always check the expiration date on the package and ask your mechanic. This is not a guide for maintaining your car in everyday life. I mean, unless you're living in a post-apocalyptic world. Some people might say why you are telling the shelf life instead of actual service life of the parts, or how long they last left on cars. That's because a car left in sunlight without any maintenance won't last long. I'll tell you more in the rest of the video about it. But if the shelf life of necessary parts are over, there will be no parts to replace the ones that you need in order to keep the vehicle running. And finishes its service life, you will still have chance to find the needed part. I put some footage of my grandfather's car for demonstration. This car is made in 90s and the last time its engine got started was 6 years ago. It's pretty much sitting in the sunlight for around 6 years straight because my grandfather can't drive it anymore. Car tires has maximum shelf life of 6 to 10 years or more before they start to rotting. Tires on my grandpa's car are at least 6 years old. Some of them are flat, but they are all fine, no cracks, no rotting. The alternatives to normal tires are airless tires. They are immune to puncture and will last 15 years or so. Other alternative is the tracks. That's right, tracks are not only for tanks and armored vehicles, but there is option to add tracks to cars like pickup trucks. Based on what I heard from a tankist guy, tracks don't have any shelf life except the one that has rubber padding. Even the rubber ones won't have any problem after expiring and will just become harsh on asphalt, pretty much like normal tanks. You can even use something solid similar to the wheels used in carriages before the invention of tires. But regardless of each alternative you choose, it's gonna be a bumpy ride and your suspension system will be under more stress. And speaking of suspension, the suspension bushing has a shelf life of 5 to 7 years for rubber ones and up to 20 years for metal ones if they don't corrode. Other rubber parts like seals, gaskets and O-rings will last around 5 to 15 years depending on their material. If they are made of natural rubber, their shelf life is shorter, but if they are synthetic, they'll last longer. Some parts like seals can possibly be replaced by leather-made parts in case there is no parts available. They still can get the job done. Also, if possible, 3D printing can be used to manufacture some of the parts if right material is used, although I don't know how much those raw materials will last before expiring. Hoses will last around 5 to 10 years. If they are made of silicone, then they would last longer. Hoses on my grandpa's car are pretty much okay except for this one. If the hose is not moving and flexibility isn't required, with some creativity, a professional mechanic or engineer might be able to change the hose with a metal or plastic pipe. Timing belt has a shelf life of 8 to 10 years, and after that, they will lose durability and service life. So you potentially can still use a timing belt after 8 years in a store. But for every year that is passed from its shelf life, it will lose 10% of service life. For example, if its service life is 100,000 kilometers, after 1 year from its expiring date, its service life will become less than 90,000 kilometers. Batteries. The arch nemesis of my grandfather. Lead acid batteries last around 5 years in storage, especially if they are dry, and last around 7 years while in use. There were records of batteries that work for over 10 years. There's also some possible ways to repair those type of batteries, like reconditioning them, or I don't know, go check what those Pakistani YouTubers do to fix them. My grandfather never had a car battery more than 2 years. I'm not talking about the grandfather who owned this car. I mean my grandfather on my mother's side. Always something happened to the battery of his pickup truck, even when it didn't die. Once the battery got stolen, once the battery exploded, and if he haven't moved away to reach for a tool a second before explosion, it would have neutralized them. Fortunately, he survived it and just got minor injuries and burns, bloodshot eyes, and couldn't hear anything for the rest of the day. Pretty much got shell-shocked. Nickel-based batteries that are used in older hybrid cars can last up to 10 years or so, and lithium batteries used in EVs can outlast the car itself by few decades. It will degrade by the time, but most of its degradation happens in first 2 decades of use. For gas and diesel-powered cars, batteries are necessary, unless you could put another source of electricity for starting the engine or use a car from, I don't know, maybe late 19th century. Engine oil will last around 5 years and synthetic engine oil lasts around 8 years. Some might last longer, and even after expiration date, they would just start to losing efficiency and could be still used. Transmission oil and gear oil will last 5 to maybe 10 years. Here comes the hydraulic fluids and their alternative. Glycol-based brake fluids last up to 5 years, and silicone-based ones can potentially last up to 10 years. If you're looking for a car that does not need fluids for the brake, you should go for cars made before 50s. So we probably can skip this one, unless you want to drive without a reliable brake, which technically doesn't stop the car from functioning. Transmission fluid can last between 5 to 10 years if kept in a cool environment, but if your car has manual transmission, then you won't need it. Power steering fluid can last up to 10 years. For getting around that, you can get a car with manual steering ones or ones with electric steering. Most cars made after 2010 has an electric steering system, but the problem is that most of them are very fuel sensitive, just like any other modern car. Older cars, especially models made before 70s, had manual steering, although it's different for countries. Like some adopted this system as a standard sooner, like United States, some did it way later. Coolant and antifreeze might last up to 10 years if they're not premixed, and if they are, they last for 5 years. Older cars didn't necessarily need it unless they are in a hot or cold environment, like a sub-zero winter or a desert, but newer models require it, otherwise they might corrode. Car models before 90s didn't need a coolant for normal temperature usage like this one. Some of these fluids can possibly be made by a chemist if they have right tools and materials. Other parts of the car don't have any shelf life, and if they does, the part is not important for functioning of the vehicle. So how long will car last after apocalypse? If you have a skilled mechanic and can find parts stored properly, you can keep them running for more than 15 or 20 years, especially if you have a chemist that can produce some of the required fluids or using car that doesn't need them. Without a mechanic and chemist, car would last around 10 years or less, depending heavily on the condition of a stored part. If you're asking about the car left on the streets, unfortunately, they probably won't last more than 1 to 3 years. And if they are sheltered like inside a garage, they might last potentially 4 to 5 years without needing a significant repair and part change. The older the car model is, the simpler its system is. I mean, look at this. Compared to the fancy new cars made nowadays, it has less parts, simpler system, and it's way easier to maintain and don't need lots of things mentioned before. If I just fill the tank, radiator, charging or changing the battery and pump the tires, it will start like it's never been left for 6 years. At first, I wanted to make this video about all vehicles, from cars and trains to helicopters and planes, but it would have been too long. If you want me to make another video about them, let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching.